My classmate Kiara became my best friend after I helped her through a difficult time. 15 years later, during a series of changes in my job, I met a woman who would revolutionize my life in an unexpected way. This is a story of friendship, resilience, and bonds that span time, showing how our actions, even the smallest ones, can have profound and unpredictable effects. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss other exciting stories like this one. The silence in the meeting room was broken only by the rustling of the pages of the documents being turned. The team carefully examined every detail, analyzing data and proposals. Davide, sitting at the head of the table, tensely observed the movements of his clients. The negotiations had been long and complicated, full of ups and downs. It seemed that the agreement was now within reach, but the latest proposals had not been enough to convince the representatives of the partner company. David knew that the failure of that deal would have enormous repercussions. He had worked hard for that contract, and the loss of such an important client would be devastating, not only for his career, but also for the company. But just as he was pondering the weight of the situation, a familiar voice rang out in the air, calling his name. Davide. He turned around quickly, in disbelief. The face of the woman calling him was incredibly familiar, despite all these years having passed. Who could it be? And then, suddenly, a flash of recognition. Kiara, his classmate from elementary school. He hadn't seen her in 15 years, but he would never forget her. That moment, that unexpected encounter, would change his life again. David had never been the most popular boy in school, but he had always stood out for his kindness and curiosity. Since he was a child, he had attended the same elementary school, and by the time he was 10, he knew almost all the students. However, Kiara's arrival had brought a breath of fresh air. She was different from the others, shy, reserved. She seemed to live in a world of her own. She always wore the same pair of shoes, worn by time, and rarely joined in the other children's games. Davide often watched her during recess, intrigued by her solitary behavior. One day he noticed that Kiara never ate her snack. Instead of consuming it, she carefully put it in her backpack and took it home. Intrigued by this gesture, he decided to approach her. "Don't you like the school snack?" he asked her in a kind tone. Kiara, visibly surprised, hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'll bring it home for my brothers," she said softly, lowering her gaze. Davide, struck by her response, realized that Kiara's situation was more difficult than he had imagined. From that day on, he decided to do something to help her. The next morning, he asked his mother to make 2 sandwiches instead of 1. At recess, he approached Kiara with a smile and offered her one of the sandwiches, saying that her mother had made a mistake by putting 2 in her backpack. Kiara gratefully accepted, and from that day on, the two began to have lunch together every day. Their friendship grew rapidly. Kiara, who had always been alone before, began to talk more and participate in games with the other children, thanks to Davide. She was a brilliant student and often helped Davide with his homework. But after 2 years, Kiara's family had to move again, and she had to say goodbye to her best friend. The separation was difficult, but David knew that she would never forget everything he had done for her. Remember to like this story if you like it. The years passed, and David graduated with a degree in economics. He began working in a large company where he rose through the ranks thanks to his commitment and dedication. At 28, he was competing with his colleague Marco for a promotion to manager. Negotiations with a major client would determine who of the two would get the position. However, despite his efforts, things did not go as planned, and Davide lost the client. The disappointment was great, and Davide began to fear for his future in the company. As he headed to his boss's office to receive the news of the bankruptcy, a familiar figure appeared in the hallway. It was Chiara. Now a successful woman, she worked for a partner company of the one where Davide was employed. The two embraced, and for a moment, all of Davide's professional problems disappeared. Chiara, unaware of the difficulties he was going through, updated him on her successes and how she had managed to close an important deal with Marco, her competitor. Davide, despite his state of mind, smiled, happy to see her again. The conversation was short, but for Davide, that brief encounter was like a breath of fresh air. In the days that followed, Davide's situation seemed to worsen. Not only had he lost the client, but it seemed that his dismissal was imminent. Then, out of the blue, he received an unexpected phone call. A company he had never had contact with offered him a job interview. Surprisingly, he found out that it was Chiara who had recommended him for the job. Thanks to her, Davide got an opportunity that changed his life again. During the interview, he found out that Chiara, after hearing about his failure with the client, had spoken to Marco and helped him get in touch with the company he was now interviewing for. In the end, Davide got the job, and his career took a new positive turn. Is there anyone who has done something for you that has affected your life the way it did with Chiara? If you like this story, leave a comment below and tell us about your experience.